Imagine a place on Earth where you could plant a flag, declare yourself king, and not a single government in the world would stop you. In an era where every square inch of our planet is surveyed, militarized, and fought over, there exists an 800-square-mile desert territory that is officially claimed by no one.
It is a geographic anomaly known as Bir Tawil, a sovereign void where the laws of nations simply refuse to land. Our investigation begins in the scorching sands between Egypt and Sudan. Why does this land exist in a state of permanent rejection? The answer isn't in the soil, but in a geopolitical trap set over a century ago.
Welcome back to Tales by Flex. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories that shape our maps, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an investigation. To understand Bir Tawil, we have to understand the land that everyone does want. This is a story of how a single line on a map created a vacuum of power that persists to this day. Bir Tawil is a quadrilateral-shaped piece of land sitting in the middle of the Nubian desert. It is a harsh, arid, and mountainous region, with no permanent inhabitants, no infrastructure, and almost no natural resources. From a distance, it looks like any other stretch of the Sahara. However, its geographic coordinates make it one of the most unique points on the globe. It is the only place on our planet, outside of Antarctica, that is considered terra nullius, land belonging to no one. To find it, you have to look exactly at the intersection of the 22nd parallel and the jagged tribal lines of East Africa. This isolation is the root cause of the mystery. Bir Tawil exists in its current state because of its relationship with its neighbor to the east, the Halaib Triangle. While Bir Tawil is 800 square miles of barren rock, the Halaib Triangle is over 7,000 square miles of fertile land with a coastline on the Red Sea. In the world of geopolitics, Bir Tawil is the consolation prize that no one can afford to win. If either Egypt or Sudan claims Bir Tawil, they are forced by the logic of international law to give up their claim to the much more valuable Halaib Triangle. Geography here is a zero-sum game. The physical reality of the desert has been superseded by the legal reality of colonial-era cartography. To understand why these borders refuse to align, we must look at how the British Empire attempted to tame a landscape it didn't fully understand. The map we see today is a geographic scar left by two conflicting agreements that were never intended to coexist. This is the isolation ethic of the desert, a place where silence is the only way to preserve a national claim. The first layer of our investigation takes us back to 1899. At the height of their colonial influence, the British established an agreement between Egypt and the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. They drew a perfectly straight line along the 22nd parallel. This was a political boundary, a clean stroke of a pen that ignored the movements of the people on the ground. According to this 1899 map, the Halaib Triangle belonged to Egypt, and Bir Tawil belonged to Sudan. It was simple, logical, and completely detached from the geographic reality of the nomadic tribes who actually lived there. However, in 1902, the British realized their mistake. They saw that the Ababda tribe, who were historically Egyptian, were using Bir Tawil for grazing, while the Bashari tribe, who were Sudanese, were using the Halaib Triangle. To fix this, they drew a second administrative boundary. This 1902 line gave the Halaib Triangle to Sudan and Bir Tawil to Egypt. Now there were two conflicting maps covering the same desert. For a few years, it was a minor bureaucratic oddity. But when Sudan gained independence in 1956, this geographic discrepancy became a major international crisis. The second layer is the geopolitical trap. Because Egypt and Sudan both want the Halaib Triangle, they must choose which map to follow.
Egypt adheres to the 1899 agreement, which says the border is a straight line. Under this map, they own Hala'ib, but Bir Tawil belongs to Sudan.
Sudan, meanwhile, adheres to the 1902 agreement, which says the border is jagged. Under this map, they own Halaib, and Bir Tawil belongs to Egypt. This leaves Bir Tawil in a state of permanent rejection. If Egypt claims Bir Tawil, they are admitting that the 1902 map is the correct one, thereby handing Halaib to Sudan. This creates a sovereign void that has lasted for over 70 years. Neither country can even acknowledge Bir Tawil on their official maps without undermining their own national security. It is a black hole of transparency. While most countries fight wars to gain territory, Egypt and Sudan are essentially fighting a war of silence to avoid it. Bir Tawil has become a geographic ghost, a place where the normal rules of statehood simply do not apply. It is the perfect laboratory for those who dream of starting their own nation without having to fight an existing army. The third layer is the rise of the micronations. In recent years, Bir Tawil has become a magnet for Internet-age explorers. In 2014, an American named Jeremiah Heaton traveled to the territory to plant a flag, so he could tell his daughter she was a real-life princess. He called it the Kingdom of North Sudan. Later, a Russian radio professional claimed it as the Kingdom of Middle Earth. These modern attempts at geographic conquest highlight a fascinating truth about our world. We are obsessed with the idea of unclaimed space. But in the eyes of international law, these claims are effectively meaningless. To be recognized as a state, you need more than a flag. You need a population, a government, and the recognition of other nations. Because Bir Tawil is terra nullius, no existing country will recognize these micronations, because doing so would mean interfering in the sensitive Egypt-Sudan border dispute. Bir Tawil is protected not by a military, but by the overwhelming weight of diplomatic inertia. It is a place where you can be a king in your own mind, but on the world map, you are still standing in a void. The fourth layer is the human reality of the desert. While the governments argue over maps, the territory is not truly empty. Nomadic gold miners and tribal herders occasionally pass through Bir Tawil, operating in a lawless zone where there is no police force, no tax collector, and no court of law. It is a wild west of the 21st century. This is the isolation ethic at work, where the lack of government oversight creates a space for both absolute freedom and absolute vulnerability. In Bir Tawil, the only law is the law of the desert, survival of the prepared. Finally, we must look at the environmental reality of the region. As climate change reshapes the Sahara, the worthless land of Bir Tawil could one day hold new value. Underground aquifers or rare earth minerals could be discovered beneath its mountains. If Bir Tawil were to suddenly become profitable, the land no one wants would instantly become the land that everyone is willing to die for. But for now, it remains a monument to colonial failure. It is a geographic scar that proves maps are not just descriptions of the land, they are weapons of political intent. Bir Tawil represents the moment where the logic of the state fails. It is a coordinate where the map has outlasted the empires that drew it. By keeping the land unclaimed, the world preserves a delicate peace, but it also preserves a mystery that continues to fascinate those of us who look at the edges of our globes. As long as the border dispute remains unresolved, Bir Tawil will remain the loneliest place on Earth, a territory defined not by who lives there, but by the two nations that refuse to call it home. Bir Tawil is more than just a geographic curiosity. It represents a case study in geopolitical deadlock. It represents a shift in how we understand sovereignty in the 21st century. We usually think of borders as fixed and immutable, but Bir Tawil proves that they are actually fluid agreements that can be switched off when it suits the interests of the state. This territory is a reminder that the world we see on our screens is often a curated version of reality. Certain locations are deleted or rejected to facilitate the stability of national identities and regional power. This trapezoid of desert proves that sovereignty is often a burden, not a prize. In an era where every inch of the planet is monitored by satellites, Bir Tawil is one of the few places where the map is intentionally blurred. It highlights the isolation ethic, using the natural world to protect the state's most sensitive legal claims. If Egypt or Sudan were to blink, the entire security architecture of East Africa could be destabilized. The silence of Bir Tawil is a strategic necessity, a geographic scar that is kept open to ensure that a larger wound does not bleed. As we move further into a century defined by resource scarcity and territory disputes, the story of Bir Tawil forces us to ask, what else have we erased from our maps for the sake of convenience? From the maritime no-go zones in the South China Sea to the restricted research stations in the Arctic, geography is still being used to create ethical exceptions. Bir Tawil is the ultimate example of this natural censorship. The crumbling limestone and the shifting sands are more effective than any military fence. It is a place where the earth itself has become the jailer of a historical mistake. So we are left with a difficult ethical question. Should Bir Tawil remain a sovereign void forever, a monument to colonial cartography and a playground for micronations? Or should the international community step in to resolve the dispute, even if it means forcing a nation to accept land it doesn't want? Let me know in the comments. Should Bir Tawil be turned into an international peace park, or is it better left to the silence of the desert? I am reading every response. If this investigation into the unclaimed maps of Africa fascinated you, you won't want to miss our next deep dive. We are heading to another geographic scar, this time in Central Asia, where an entire ocean was erased by a single government decision. We are going to the place where ships now sit in the middle of a toxic desert. Next week, the Aral Sea, the geography of a disappearing ocean. Make sure to subscribe to Tales by Flex so you never miss a story behind the maps. Geography is the lens through which we view our power, and sometimes the most important stories are the ones that no one wants to tell. I'll see you in the next investigation as we continue to uncover the secrets that define our world.
Goodbye for now.